What if the most important part of the message had never been told? Imagine the scene, silence in the background, only a light sound of wind passing between the stones, as if something wanted to speak, but didn't. Around Medjugorje, many speak of secrets, dates, spiritual signs, and fragments that spark curiosity. But what if the thread that connects it all, the one that gives meaning to the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, had been left out precisely because it was simple, practical, and deeply demanding? What you're about to discover now may surprise you. This isn't a new leak, nor a sensationalist revelation. It's a detail omitted because it goes unnoticed. While everyone seeks the extraordinary, the real call is for a kind of daily conversion that puts the Eucharist back at the center of life, prayer of the heart as daily breathing, fasting and reconciliation as a guardrail. Have you ever experienced this? Hearing something powerful, but feeling like it's missing the exact piece that explains why everything feels fragmented? Perhaps the point is this: the message doesn't call for a rush for signs, but rather spiritual discernment to recognize where God is at work in small acts. Medjugorje isn't just a map of curiosities, it's a roadmap for transformation, a concrete life proposal that begins at home with the family as the domestic church and expands to the world. When we talk about the 7 unrevealed messages, what's really at stake is the key that aligns all the others, a focus on silent, coherent, constant practice. Stay with me until the end, because when this piece falls into place, the previously loose threads begin to point in the same direction and cease to be a mystery and become a path. Consider an example of an omitted detail. Many repeat the word prayer, but almost never explain that prayer of the heart isn't just reciting formulas. It's allowing the word to descend into everyday life, allowing patience to return before shouting, allowing reconciliation to overcome pride, allowing the Eucharist to shape choices. It seems simple, but that's precisely where the demand lies. The heart wants spectacle. The message demands fidelity. We hear about prophecies and spiritual signs, but the final piece, the one that organizes the story from within, is the daily decision to place Christ at the center and measure our steps by Him. What you're about to discover now may surprise you, because perhaps you realize there wasn't a lack of information. There was a lack of willingness to transform what you already knew into lived reality. If this touches you, it's because the call is intimate and direct. Fasting as a school of freedom, reconciliation as a bridge that rebuilds, the Eucharist as a route, spiritual discernment as a beacon to avoid getting lost in the noise. The 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje cease to be an enigma when we assume the secret wasn't locked away, forgotten in practice. Have you ever been there? Having all the pieces on the table, but not finding the image because the frame was missing? That's what we're talking about, the frame that provides context and transforms each passage into an invitation to concrete conversion, to the hope that doesn't deceive, to the preparation that generates peace. Stay with me until the end, because in the next few minutes we'll put this frame back together, silently and firmly, so that each word finds its place. We'll pave the way with this guiding thread, simple, demanding, luminous, and let it reveal what they forgot to tell. No conclusions now, just the passage that leads us to the next stage, where this final piece begins to accurately draw the map you've always sensed. What comes next is where it all fits together, and as you feel this thread of the message aligning within you, I want to extend a simple but powerful invitation. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Sharing your feelings helps create a vibrant space for exchange, where each story strengthens the other. I read everything, and often it's your experience that inspires the next piece of content, so don't keep it to yourself. And if this video is already helping you see the messages of Medjugorje in a different way, click the like button. This will help the algorithm understand that this is content that deserves to be shared with more people, and it might be just what someone needed to hear today. And take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, because each subscription is like turning on a light on this path we're walking together. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more hearts. Stay with me, because the next part will delve even deeper into this last piece and begin to reveal how it transforms the way we live our daily lives. When someone hears Medjugorje, they immediately think of apparitions, secrets, chronologies, and signs that seem born of the extraordinary. But beyond the noise and the rush for new things, there is a story that speaks to the rhythm of the heart, a silent journey that calls for real transformation, concrete decisions, and a mindset willing to place faith at the center of everyday life. Medjugorje is a small village in Bosnia and Herzegovina that since 1981 has entered the map of popular devotion. However, more than just a geographical address of stories, it is an invitation to go within, to the backstage where the hidden truth ceases to be a distant enigma and begins to have a direct impact on everyday choices. When we speak of the 7 unrevealed messages, we are not evoking a vault of forbidden words. We are talking about the passage that many cite but few explain, because it demands the courage to look at one's own life and see where prayer of the heart, the Eucharist, fasting and reconciliation have not yet descended from speech to action. Before delving into this plan in detail, it's only fair to give you a clear overview. I spent months immersing myself in pilgrims' accounts, testimonies, and memories. I compared versions, confronted translations, revisited contexts, and separated myth from essence without fueling controversy. This curation wasn't an exercise in curiosity, but a search for coherence, a map to identify the thread that connects what so often appears fragmented. There are devotional documents, interviews, homilies, letters, spiritual diaries, and there are also the interpretations that the community builds over time. Amidst all this, what interested me was perceiving patterns, where the call repeats itself, where the message expands, where practice imposes itself as an axis. From there, the 7 messages take shape not as isolated mysteries, but as chapters of a single storyline, with a logic that moves from listening to commitment, from signal to decision. When you hear about these messages, you might imagine codes, keys and dates. However, the core insists on a simple and demanding path, prayer from the heart, not as an automatic formula, but as a breath of the soul. Fasting, not as a stoic challenge, but as freedom from what controls us. Reconciliation, not as a pretty word, but as a bridge rebuilt where pride has collapsed. Eucharist at the center, not as a ritual scheduled on the agenda, but as an encounter capable of ordering affections, priorities, and relationships. This is the hidden truth that goes unnoticed because it lacks headline appeal, but has a profound impact on families, on routines, on the way we navigate trials. Those who observe from the outside see suspense and chronology. Those who dare to enter realize that the story is about transformation, the kind measured by what you choose when no one is looking. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because as I studied testimonies and cross-reference memories, what emerged most forcefully was the difference between information and formation. Information fills the mind. Formation descends into the will and changes behavior. The stories that touched me most weren't the most spectacular, but rather the discreet ones. People who decided to forgive after years of not speaking to a family member. Couples who reinstated the Eucharist as the centerpiece of Sunday and saw their home regain a kind of inexplicable peace. Young people who began fasting prudently, accompanied and experienced a self-mastery that illuminated their decisions. These are small, behind-the-scenes glimpses of silent revelations, where the extraordinary happens within, without fireworks, but with tangible results. And that's why so many talk and few explain, because explaining implies inviting the other to commit, and commitment stirs resistance. Think of the plot as a mosaic. If you place the pieces without a reference image, everything seems random. When the drawing emerges, each fragment finds its place. This is how the 7 messages are when viewed through the right lens. They don't compete with each other. Rather, they are established as stages on a single journey. First, listening, the prayer of the heart that trains attention. Then, realignment, fasting, and reconciliation, correcting habits, repairing bonds. Then the center, the Eucharist, source and summit, calling for the cohesion of what was heard and promised. Finally, the mission, the family as a domestic church, the radiance of a maturing faith. When this script enters the scene, the mindset changes. It stops expecting ready-made answers and begins to discern, to test the spirits, to verify fruits. You realize that secret doesn't mean hiding information, but revealing a direction that requires patience, perseverance, and daily choices. There's also a delicate point, anxiety about signs. It stems from the fear of missing the great revelation and produces a kind of spiritual fatigue. In the testimonies I analyzed, whenever anxiety gave way to constancy, a new freedom emerged. Less need for external confirmation, more attention to internal fruits. Less comparison with others' paths, more fidelity to what was clear to you. It's a shift in mindset that liberates, because it shifts the question from what will happen to who am I becoming? And this is a question that changes the course of any journey. By making this shift, the person returns to the essential. The hidden truth is not a new fact. It is the meaning that has always been there, begging to be experienced. Don't confuse simplicity with naivete, however. The path is simple, but not simplistic. It requires discipline, habits, and recovery. It requires humility to recognize failures and begin again. In my stories, I often came across someone who, after a retreat, returned to their daily routine and fell into the same patterns. The difference came when, instead of giving up, the person made micro-decisions, 10 minutes of heartfelt prayer. At dawn, a small, well-guided weekly renunciation, an objective request for forgiveness before bed, a concrete commitment to Sunday liturgy. The impact of these decisions, taken together, produces a before and after invisible to the hurried eye, but visible in the mood, the mannerisms, the willingness to serve. This is how the message goes beyond concept and becomes flesh. Another thing that jumped out at me from the testimonies, the importance of filtering sources. In times of excessive content, credibility isn't born from volume, but from discretion. Therefore, in addition to reading and listening extensively, I revisited contexts, checked dates, compared translations, and sought to avoid sensationalism. Not because the extraordinary doesn't exist, but because the extraordinary, without the ordinary lived well, becomes a distraction. When the foundation is firm, prayer, the Eucharist, reconciliation, charity, then any sign, if it comes, finds fertile ground and doesn't deviate from the path. This lucidity protects the heart, avoids extremes, and sustains the journey. More than discovering what no one knows, what changes lives is aligning what we already know with what we don't yet do. This reading also helps us navigate trials without losing our peace. In the testimonies I studied, peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was a presence that reorganized chaos. Families experiencing loss, difficult diagnoses, financial crises. When faith was anchored in practice, the reaction wasn't to deny the pain, but to convert it into offering, intercession, and solidarity. This is one of the lesser discussed aspects of the revelations, the ability to create stable people amidst the world's instability, people who don't outsource hope, who choose the good that's possible now, who transform their own homes into places of respite. There's no headline more revolutionary than this. You may be wondering how all this translates in practice into verifiable steps. The answer isn't a magic formula, but a way of walking. Start small, stay faithful, revise honestly, ask for help when needed. This is the grammar of great change. And when the language of the heart learns this grammar, the 7 messages cease to be a distant theory and begin to tell their own story, one that is written in silence but leaves marks of reconciliation wherever it goes. Little by little, anxiety transforms into serene vigilance, comparison into gratitude, fear into trust. And what was once a maze of information becomes a road with a horizon. All this to say that by separating myth from essence, what remains is a possible, demanding and beautiful path. There are no shortcuts, but there is enough light for the next step. And it is this next step that begins to appear when we allow the message to read us from within, point out blind spots, heal impatience, illuminate decisions. The journey becomes less about having answers and more about being the answer where we are. At work, in family, among friends, in the secret choices no one applauds. It is from this place that true novelty springs, the kind that depends, not on noise but on roots. If at any point along this path something sparked within you, hold on to that spark. It's often the most reliable sign that the direction is right. And when the direction is right, even small steps have future potential. We continue to put the pieces together, not to satisfy curiosity, but to honor a calling. Comment: this makes sense to me. When we talk about secrets and unrevealed messages, many people imagine a hidden treasure chest, a new revelation that would suddenly change everything. But the true enigma of the final piece isn't something new, but rather what has always been present between the lines, waiting for the heart to be ready to see it. This forgotten piece isn't about hidden phrases or withheld information, but about an inner posture, a daily, silent coherence that often goes unnoticed. It's like reading an incomplete text. The words are there, but without the final phrase that connects everything. The meaning feels loose, fragmented. The same is true of the messages of Medjugorje. Without this final thread, everything seems like a collection of isolated recommendations, when in fact there is a living unity that demands preparation of the heart. The last piece is above all, an invitation to coherence, and coherence is not an abstract concept. It is the art of aligning what we believe with what we do. Have you ever noticed how a single detail can change the entire meaning of a story? All it takes is a phrase, an attitude, a glance. Likewise, a daily gesture is enough to transform a seemingly lukewarm spiritual life into a true journey of transformation. This is the hidden truth that many fail to mention because it seems too simple. Yet, it is precisely in this simplicity that the profound impact lies. Prayer without action becomes repetition. Fasting without purpose becomes dieting. Reconciliation without humility becomes formality. But when each practice is illuminated by this final piece, the decision to live coherently, everything connects and takes on new weight. Some seek spectacular signs, grandiose revelations, but the most striking testimonies I encountered always pointed to this discrete key: inner preparation. A prepared heart is like plowed soil, capable of receiving the seed and allowing it to bear fruit. Without this preparation, even the most powerful message risks being lost in the wind. This final piece acts as a link between the parts. It gives meaning where before there were only fragments. It is what transforms the prayer of the heart into a living dialogue, fasting into inner freedom, the Eucharist into a vital center, and reconciliation into a solid bridge. Without it, everything is reduced to scattered practices. With it, every gesture becomes part of a harmonious whole. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when looking at the history of the apparitions and the accounts of those who were in Medjugorje, what one perceives is not a lack of information, but a lack of integration. The messages are available, the invitations are clear, but what's missing is the determination to fit each piece into a single frame. It's like putting together a puzzle. You can have almost all the pieces fitted together, but if one is missing, the picture isn't complete. And it doesn't matter how small that piece is. It can be small, discreet, almost imperceptible, but without it, the picture doesn't hold together. This is the inner attitude requested in the messages: fidelity to the small, commitment to the ordinary, the silent preparation of the heart. It's this part that, when forgotten, leaves everything feeling like disconnected fragments. The fascinating thing is realizing that this final piece doesn't require something spectacular or inaccessible. It demands perseverance, simple but consistent choices. It's a new mindset, less anxiety for revelations and more attention to what has already been delivered. A journey that shifts the focus from the extraordinary to the everyday, from noise to silence, from waiting for signs to deciding to be a sign. This is the true silent revolution that many overlook. And it is at this point that the message of Medjugorje gains its most transformative power, when it stops being merely heard and starts being lived. Because life, with its struggles and behind-the-scenes moments, is the stage where every word becomes flesh. When this final piece falls into place, the impact is immediate. It doesn't mean all problems disappear, but they gain a new perspective. The hidden truth ceases to be mysterious and reveals itself as concrete practice. Forgiving before the wound turns to bitterness, choosing prayer even when the mind is tired, resuming fasting with humility after failures, prioritizing family even in the midst of a rush. These are decisions that seem small, but they change everything because they demonstrate coherence. And coherence is the hallmark of authenticity. Without it, spirituality risks becoming empty talk. With it, every gesture, no matter how small, carries the weight of eternity. This is the enigma of the final piece. It's not a secret kept in vaults, but a silent demand that goes unnoticed because it's practical, concrete, and everyday. And perhaps that's precisely why many ignore it. But when this piece is embraced, the spiritual journey becomes integrated, solid, and full of meaning. It's as if life itself gains a new frame, revealing an image that was previously incomplete. And it's from this point on that the messages begin to reveal their true depth, inviting each person to embark on a path of real transformation, where revelations cease to be theory and become flesh in daily experience. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. In the beginning, everything seemed new, almost urgent. The first accounts of Medjugorje carried a raw power, an emotion that moved those who listened, even from a distance. People spoke of peace, prayer, conversion, not as abstract concepts, but as something alive happening before them. It was as if heaven had descended for an instant to remind them that there was still time, that history was not lost. The invitation was clear: return to God, reconcile, put one's life in order. There was a vibration of the beginning of a journey, a sense that every word carried weight and that every decision could change the course of a soul. This wasn't just news, it was a personal calling. And that's how the first messages touched hearts around the world. But as time passed, something curious happened. That initial intensity began to fade for many. What was once seen as a wake-up call was transformed into short quotes, inspirational phrases, quick posts. Pray, pray, pray. For example, Initially, it was an almost dramatic request, repeated so there would be no doubt of its urgency. Today, this phrase is often reduced to a catchphrase without understanding how much it called for a concrete change of mindset, a new rhythm to the day, a fixed place for heartfelt prayer. The same happened with the call to conversion. At first, it sounded like a turning point, a moment of radical decision. Now, for some, it has become almost synonymous with getting a little better, without the weight of a transformation that involves choices, renunciations, and profound reconciliations. Another important milestone was when the message began to emphasize fasting, not just as a traditional practice, but as a path to inner liberation. In the early years, this point was met with astonishment, almost as something impossible, and at the same time with fascination, because it seemed like a key to something greater. Gradually, however, this aspect was softened, mentioned generically, until it became just another suggestion among many. But those who have truly lived this experience speak of an inner clarity that is difficult to explain, as if distractions lost their power and the heart could hear better. This is the kind of detail that, when put back in place, changes the meaning of everything, because it reveals that the message is not just to be admired, but to be practiced in the body, in time, and in routine. And perhaps one of the most powerful milestones is the call to place the Eucharist at the center of life. In the early messages, this was presented as the foundation of everything, the meeting point that gave meaning to the other recommendations. Today, this point also risks being reduced to a nice phrase, as if it were simply attending Mass more attentively. But the original force of this call was radical. It asked that one's entire life revolve around this encounter, that decisions be made based on it, that the home, family, and even relationships be reorganized based on this presence. This is the piece that many overlook and thus lose the power of the entire picture. When we look at this timeline, we realize that there wasn't a change in the content of the messages, but rather in the way they were received. The initial emotion gradually became custom, and custom became a mechanical habit. Those words that once brought tears now, in many cases, are read without making an impact. And that's where the risk of forgetting the last piece comes in. It's precisely what keeps the flame alive, what prevents the message from becoming just a memory. Without it, the story loses its sense of urgency, its invitation to the present, its ability to influence the decisions we make today. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this timeline isn't just about remembering dates or phases, but recognizing where we ourselves allowed the power of messages to become routine. It's about looking back and realizing at what point the call stopped being a cry and became merely a whisper in the depths of our consciousness. It's about admitting that often we treat these messages as beautiful memories, when in fact they were written to be a compass. When we reclaim this emotional thread, something is reborn within us, a desire to resume, to begin again, to restore to the words the weight they had at the beginning. This is the transformation that gives meaning to the journey, that moves the heart, and that restores to catchphrases the character of a call to action. And perhaps this is the greatest challenge, not allowing the power of the message to be lost in time. Because it's not just a story from 1981, it lives on, renewing itself every day, waiting for hearts willing to respond. So, when we revisit the timeline honestly, we're not just remembering. We're putting each milestone back in its rightful place, like someone restoring an old painting and restoring its original colors. And when this restoration happens, the impact is immediate. Prayer becomes encounter again, fasting becomes liberation again, reconciliation becomes a bridge again, and the Eucharist becomes the center again. Everything fits together again. Comment: that makes sense to me. When we try to understand the messages of Medjugorje with our minds alone, it's easy to get lost in interpretations, competing versions, or even in a race for new things that seem more exciting than transformative. But when we use 3 specific lenses, something opens up before us, as if the image finally gains clarity. These lenses are discernment, practice, and purpose, and it is through them that we can see the forgotten piece, the one that gives meaning to the whole and prevents the message from being lost in noise or empty repetition. The first lens is discernment. It helps us distinguish true signs from noise. Not everything that shines is light, and not all news deserves the same attention. Discernment is like a silent filter that separates the voice of conscience from the echo of distractions. Throughout history, we've seen how many people have clung more to rumors than to the essence, and this has always led to confusion. But when the heart learns to discern, things become clearer. Signs cease to be spectacles and become reminders, small invitations that point in the same direction. This lens prevents the journey from becoming an anxious search for revelations and returns the focus to what truly transforms. Discernment is not the fruit of haste, but of silence, prayer, and listening. It teaches us to read not just the words, but the spirit that sustains them. The second lens is practice. Here's a point that cannot be overlooked. It's not enough to intellectually understand the messages. We must live them physically and in our daily lives. Prayer of the heart, fasting, reconciliation, the Eucharist, and family life are not devotional accessories, but the beating heart of the message. It is in practice that theory is confirmed. It is in daily actions that our mindset is transformed. Think about prayer. Without it, we become vulnerable to the whirlwind of the world. With it, we gain an inner axis that reorganizes thoughts and feelings. Think about fasting. Without it, we are easily dominated by immediate desires. With it, we learn freedom. Think about reconciliation. Without it, we accumulate burdens that make us sick. With it, we rebuild bridges. Think about the Eucharist. Without it, faith fragments. With it, everything aligns around the presence that gives meaning. And think about the family as a domestic church. Without it, faith is restricted to isolated moments. With it, it spreads throughout the home and becomes a lifestyle. This lens shows that the last piece is not hidden in secret words, but in the willingness to embody the message in every choice. And so, we come to the third lens. Purpose. This is perhaps the most challenging because it forces us to shift our mindset. Often people approach messages motivated by fear of the future, fear of catastrophes, fear of the unknown. But the purpose that permeates everything is not fear, it is hope. The messages are not a proclamation of despair, but a map of preparation. And preparation is not living in fear, but living awake. When hope is at the center, each recommendation ceases to be a burden and becomes an impulse. Prayer, fasting, reconciliation, and the Eucharist cease to be obligations and become opportunities to strengthen the soul to face whatever comes. Purpose restores the message to its essence, not to frighten, but to prepare, not to paralyze, but to mobilize. It is at this point that we realize how the forgotten piece has always been there. Life is not to be lived in the shadow of fear, but in the light of hope that guides. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when these 3 lenses come together, transformation is inevitable. Discernment protects against excess and distortion. Practice embodies the message in concrete terms, and purpose points to the hope that sustains everything. Without discernment, we fall into noise. Without practice, we remain in rhetoric. Without purpose, we lose ourselves in fear. But when all 3 come together, the message gains substance, clarity, and impact. It's as if each isolated part finally comes together into a single picture, revealing the hidden truth that has always been waiting to be recognized. And it is in this union that the final piece ceases to be a distant enigma and becomes a key to life, a true invitation for those who wish to walk with authenticity and coherence. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. When we delve deeper into the heart of these messages, we realize there's a point where, over time, many have pressed the mute button. It's as if the most demanding part has been pushed to the back burner, perhaps because it doesn't generate headlines, doesn't fuel anxiety about dates, doesn't convey that sense of dramatic urgency that so captures attention. This point is concrete conversion. And concrete conversion is everything that moves from theory to life, that leaves the mouth and becomes action. It's in this silent place that the messages find their true power, because they're not about fueling curiosity about what will happen, but about transforming the now, the present, the intimacy of relationships. It's much more challenging to ask someone to truly forgive a sibling you haven't spoken to in years than to simply warn them about future events. It's much more revolutionary to invite someone to mend a broken relationship than to talk about spectacular signs in the sky. When messages insist on conversion, they're not just saying change a little, but let your heart be reorganized. Concrete conversion is the decision to live coherently even without applause, to cultivate silent fidelity when no one is looking, to choose the good that is possible now without waiting for ideal conditions. And this is precisely the part that many have left aside because it demands surrender. Talking about prophecies generates debate, but asking for reconciliation demands humility. Chasing signs creates a stir, but asking for forgiveness stirs pride. And it is at this point that the message gains or loses strength. When it is lived, it changes destinies. When it is merely repeated, it becomes a landscape. I remember a simple testimony that illustrates this forgotten piece well. It was from a mother who, after years of hearing about prayer from the heart, decided to take a practical step. Every day, before her children left the house, she gathered everyone in the living room for a 1-minute prayer. That was it. 60 seconds of silence and surrender. She said that within a few weeks the atmosphere in the house had changed. The arguments diminished, the tension dissolved, the feeling of rushing became lighter. Small gesture, big impact. This is the kind of attitude that unlocks the meaning of the messages, because it transforms everyday life into a space for encounter with God. Another micro-example I heard from a pilgrim was that of reconciliation that seemed impossible. He had fought with his brother over an inheritance, and for years the two hadn't spoken. After repeatedly hearing the call to conversion and forgiveness, he decided to take the first step. He wrote a letter, apologizing and acknowledging his mistakes. There wasn't a grand speech from the other side, but there was a short, simple response that paved the way for a conversation. Today the two speak, albeit not every day, and the weight he carried inside has dissolved. That's the beauty of concrete conversion. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to begin. The first step changes the entire story. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we understand that this silent point is the key, we realize that the call is not to live in anticipation of something that will come, but to live transformed now. It is forgiveness given before hurt takes root. It is the decision to reconcile even when it seems too late. It is the commitment to be faithful to the silent promises we made to God and others, even if no one applauds. This is the hidden truth that underpins the messages. It is not about waiting for great signs, but about becoming a living sign in the world, a concrete reflection of what we believe. When this piece is placed back at the center, everything falls into place. Prayer gains depth, fasting gains meaning, the Eucharist becomes the beating heart of the week, and family life becomes the first altar. Without this decision, the message becomes theory. With it, it becomes a path a story of transformation. And this is perhaps the most beautiful and, at the same time, the most challenging part. It cannot be experienced by anyone in your place. It's personal, intimate, non-transferable. It's a daily, sometimes hourly choice, and the more you practice it, the more you realize that the mute has been deactivated and that the message is ringing with full force within you. It's at this point that the extraordinary begins to happen behind the scenes of ordinary life. Say to yourself, "This makes sense to me." One of the most delicate aspects of this entire journey is understanding the difference between perceiving a sign and depending on it to keep walking. Humans have a natural tendency to seek visible confirmation, something that tells them you're on the right path. And of course, this has its value. After all, God often communicates through signs that speak to the heart. But there's a dangerous point where this search becomes an anxious dependence, almost as if faith could only be sustained if something extraordinary happened today, right now, before our eyes. And it's precisely here that the message calls for a step of maturity, less spectacle, more constancy, less need for proof, more quiet trust. When we carefully read the accounts and the words that have been repeated over the years, we realize that the emphasis is always on simple and profound attitudes: silence, prayer of the heart, fasting, reconciliation, and the Eucharist at the center. These are not secondary recommendations, not add-ons for those with more time or greater devotion. They are the core, the key that unlocks the meaning of everything else. Without them, the signs lose their weight and become curiosity. With them, even the smallest gesture becomes inner confirmation that the direction is right. It is as if heaven were saying, "I have already given you what is essential. Now live and endure." This dependence on signs may seem pious, but it often reveals spiritual insecurity. It's as if we're always in need of a new stimulus to move forward, when in reality, the invitation is to build a stable mindset, one that remains steadfast even on days when nothing extraordinary happens. There's something very liberating when we reach this point. We no longer need new things to believe. We no longer live according to expectations, and faith becomes adult. The signs that arrive are received with gratitude, but they are no longer the main fuel for the journey. What sustains us is the renewed decision to live what has already been shown. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this transition from dependence to constancy radically changes the impact of the messages on the lives of those who hear them. The person who was previously always waiting for something external begins to look within, recognizing that the greatest sign is the transformation itself that is taking place. It is the peace that previously did not exist, the reconciliation that seemed impossible, the habit of prayer that was once a burden and has now become a pleasure. These are the fruits that confirm the journey, far more than any extraordinary phenomenon. And this is one of the hidden truths that many fail to highlight. The most important signs are those that remain when the noise ceases, when the lights go out, and only silence remains. It is in this silence that the prayer of the heart flourishes. It is in it that the Eucharist finds space to reorganize everything around it. The most powerful testimonies I encountered always had this common thread. The person had stopped chasing new things and started remaining faithful. And this fidelity isn't cold or mechanical, it's passionate. It's like someone who loves someone and continues writing letters, even when they don't receive an immediate response, because love doesn't depend on a response to exist. This is the point at which spiritual life ceases to be a sequence of ups and downs and becomes a stable, meaningful journey. And the most interesting thing is that when this stability arrives, even external signs seem to take on new value because they are no longer a requirement, but a gift. This shift in mindset is a kind of silent revolution. It demands that we learn to value the behind-the-scenes aspects of spiritual life, those moments that no one sees, that no one applauds, but that are decisive. When we choose prayer over haste, forgiveness over resentment, the Eucharist over emptiness, we are producing invisible signs that perhaps only heaven can register. And this is precisely what gives depth to our journey, the recognition that constancy is the greatest act of faith we can offer. It's not about denying the signs, but about integrating them into an already solid path, so that they don't become crutches, but rather loving confirmations. Constancy is also what protects against deception. A soul eager for signs can easily be carried away by any new development, even if it is unfounded. But a soul that remains faithful in prayer, silence, and the Eucharist learns to discern, to weigh things, to wait. And this waiting is full of meaning, because it is not passive, it is active. It cultivates the land, waters the seed, prepares the ground. And in due time, the fruits appear. This is the great promise. If we remain, we will see the results, not as someone watching a show, but as someone who patiently reaps what they sow. This is the deepest invitation of the messages, to break out of the cycle of anxiety and enter the rhythm of perseverance. It's exchanging agitated expectation for calm hope. It's understanding that the greatest miracles happen in secret, and that the greatest confirmation is realizing we are no longer the same as before. Comment: I'm on this journey too. When we talk about spiritual protection, it's common for our imaginations to run to images of invisible walls or epic battles between good and evil. But the true map of protection that the messages indicate is much more concrete and at the same time quieter. It's not based on fear, but on building a well-founded life. It's like preparing a house for winter. It's not about living in fear, but about reinforcing doors, adjusting windows, stocking up on essentials, and lighting the fire at the right time. Likewise, this spiritual map is a series of actions that put the heart in the right place day after day until life itself becomes a fortress of peace. It all begins with prayer of the heart. It's not a rushed prayer nor a mechanical ritual. It's the act of making space to listen. It's not a quantity of words, it's a quality of presence. It's sitting for a few minutes and allowing the heart to slow down, the breathing to find a rhythm, the mind to stop racing. This daily prayer shapes the interior like water carving stone, slowly but irreversibly. It's prayer that reorganizes emotions, that brings clarity amidst chaos, that prepares the ground for any other spiritual practice to take effect. Without this foundation, the other steps are fragile because the soul remains agitated and scattered. Then comes fasting, which must be lived with prudence and awareness. It's not about punishment or disorderly penance, but about regaining self-control. Fasting educates desires, teaches that not everything needs to be met immediately, and breaks invisible dependencies. It has a direct impact on mentality. By saying no to what is superfluous, we make room for what is essential. The body learns to collaborate with the spirit, and the spirit gains a new freedom. Anyone who has experienced a well-guided fast knows that it even changes the way we pray. The mind becomes more alert, listening more attentive, prayer deeper. It's as if the heart becomes more attuned to capturing God's signals. Reconciliation is another indispensable pillar of this map. Not only sacramental confession, which is central, but also the practical steps of asking for forgiveness, reaching out and repairing the damage done. Nothing weighs more heavily on the heart than accumulated hurt, and nothing blocks the action of grace more than a lack of forgiveness. The messages insist on this point because they know it's where many stories break down. When someone decides to reconcile, they're building a bridge where there was once a wall. They're allowing love to flow again. and this has a liberating effect, not only for the forgiver, but for the entire family. This practice opens space for a peace that no theory could offer. The Eucharist is the center of this map, the point around which everything revolves. Placing the Eucharist at the center of life is more than attending Mass once a week. It's preparing for this encounter, arriving with a clean heart, remaining in thanksgiving afterward, and allowing this moment to illuminate decisions. When the Eucharist is at the center, everything else falls into place. Time adjusts, priorities align, relationships transform. It's no wonder so many messages point to this point, because it is there that God's presence becomes palpable, that grace becomes real nourishment. And finally, family life as a domestic church completes this map. It's in the home that everything needs to begin. There's no point talking about conversion if it doesn't involve how we treat our loved ones. It's in the way we sit at the table, how we apologize, how we celebrate the small moments together, that the message becomes flesh. When the family becomes a place of prayer, dialogue, and forgiveness, it becomes a living fortress. It's there that children learn the value of the sacred, where couples renew their vows, where faith becomes a concrete inheritance. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when these 5 points connect, the 7 messages cease to be loose phrases and become a true roadmap for transformation. The heart, nourished by prayer, finds direction. The body, educated by fasting, learns freedom. The soul, purified by reconciliation, finds peace. Life, centered on the Eucharist, is reorganized. And the family, restored as a domestic church, becomes a beacon that illuminates the surroundings. This is the map of protection that not only protects, but also strengthens. It doesn't exempt us from storms, but gives us deep roots to navigate. Then, without getting lost, comment, "That makes sense to me." I remember a story that had a profound impact on me and perfectly conveyed this spiritual protection map in action. It was about a simple man named Paolo, who carried an old wound in his heart. He had fought with his father in his youth, and the two grew so distant that they spent years without exchanging a word. Paolo grew up, married, and had children, but deep down, he felt something was always off, as if a shadow were following his steps. He said that when he first heard the call to reconciliation in the messages, he felt angry. He thought it impossible to take that step. But something began to work within him slowly and insistently. He decided to start small, applying what he had learned. He woke up 10 minutes earlier to pray the prayer of the heart, began fasting once a week, attended Mass with his family on Sundays, and little by little, he felt the weight lift. He described the day he decided to visit his father as like crossing a crumbling bridge. His hands were sweating, his heart pounding, and each step felt like an act of courage. When he arrived, he found his father in the backyard, sitting on a wooden chair, staring into space. Paolo said he hadn't planned a speech. She simply knelt beside him and tearfully asked for forgiveness. His father, who seemed so hardened, cried too and hugged him without saying a word for a few minutes. In that silence, something broke. Or rather, something was rebuilt. He said it felt like a wall had crumbled, and the air felt lighter, almost breathable. In the following days, his father began visiting his family, met his grandchildren, and even returned to Mass after years away. This story shows how true transformation doesn't happen all at once, but is the fruit of small decisions that accumulate until the heart is ready. Prayer, fasting, reconciliation, the Eucharist, family life, each point was a stone placed to rebuild that bridge. And when it was finally firm, Paolo was able to cross. The impact was far greater than he imagined. Not only did he find peace, but the entire family was touched by this reconciliation. The atmosphere in the house changed, conversations became lighter, and faith gained a new place in daily life. He said that for the first time in years, he felt his own life had become a living testimony to the messages he had previously only heard from afar. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we see a testimony like this, we realize that the calling isn't theoretical, it's practical and possible. No matter how much time has passed, how deep the wound, or how distant the solution seems, there's always a first step that can be taken. Transformation begins within in silence, but the fruits appear on the outside. And when they do, they touch not only the one who took the step, but everyone around them. This is how messages come to life, when they stop being a memory or a story and become a path you tread, a choice you make, a decision that changes the course of an entire family. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. And after all this, it becomes impossible not to see the point that was hidden in plain sight. What they forgot to say is that the message is only complete when it becomes life. As long as it remains merely knowledge stored in the mind or a story we admire from afar, it remains incomplete. The power lies in allowing it to become flesh in our decisions, our reactions, our gestures. That's when it invades our routine, reorganizes time, shapes the way we speak to those close to us, even changes the way we breathe in the face of difficulties. This is the true silent revolution. Not waiting for something to change outside, but allowing something to change inside first. It's as if the entire sky is waiting for our yes, so that things can begin to align. So I want to give you a simple challenge, but one that can have a huge impact on your week. Set aside 10 minutes a day for heartfelt prayer, preferably at the same time, like scheduling a date, and choose a concrete gesture of reconciliation. It could be a message to someone you've been avoiding, a phone call, or even a word of forgiveness spoken silently if the person isn't ready to hear it. These 2 steps may seem small, but they have the power to reconfigure the way you live your days. It's amazing how something so simple can generate such profound transformation when done consistently. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because these small habits are the first pieces we put back in place to make sense of the whole picture. Once you start, the message itself guides the next step, almost as if there were an invisible thread pulling you in the right direction. And it's precisely this thread that we'll follow together from now on. There's a way to translate each of the 7 messages into practical actions that fit into your routine. Not like a to-do list, but as a way to reorganize your life around the essentials. When this happens, the house changes, the atmosphere shifts, and the way you deal with challenges takes on a new direction. If this insight resonated with you, comment, "I want to live the last bit," and tell me which habit you'll start today. I read the comments, and many of them end up inspiring future content, so your experience could help someone seeking the strength to take the same step. Get ready, because from here on out, we'll dive into the first message and unravel how it can become a habit that changes your home from the inside and turns on a light you might not even know was off. If you've made it this far, it's because this message spoke to you in a special way. So here's what you need to do. Write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end," just so I know you were there every step of this reflection. This also inspires others who come here to continue on this same journey. And if this content helped, you see something new, leave a like. It's what keeps this space growing and leading more people to experience this transformation from the inside out. And if you feel like this is the kind of conversation you want to have more often, subscribe to the channel to follow along with me in the next steps, because there's much more to explore. There's a video here that complements this topic and will help you take the next step. Click and continue with me there. It will be the natural continuation of this conversation.